On the 28th of November 2003, in Pennsauken in New Jersey, a 16-year-old teenager, Sherita Williams, left their house to go visit her boyfriend, Kevin. After reaching at Kevin's home at about 6:30 p.m. and knocked at the door, Kevin's mother opened the door and Sherita asked her if she could see Kevin. Kevin's mother didn't like her, so she told her that Kevin was asleep and she sent her away. By the time Sherita was returning home, it was already dark at night as she passed over 33th Street Bridge. While passing there, she came in contact with a 21-year-old man, Warren Dixon, who was coming from the mall. Dixon wanted to have sex with Sherita, but she turned him down. Since they were all alone, Dixon raped her and then strangled her to death. He disposed of her body under the bridge and then fled away from the scene. Why would Dixon murder Sherita, who was his school classmate? Join us as we unravel the events leading to the murder of Sherita Williams. Sherita Williams was born on 31st of October 1987 in Pennsauken in New Jersey. Her mother was known as Wilma Williams and her father was known as Harry Williams, and he worked as a correctional officer. Sherita was born in a family of 3 children. She had a sister known as Sabrina and a younger brother known as John Henry. Sherita was affectionately called Sunshine by her friends and family. They said that she had the abilities to light up any room she came into. She was a very beautiful, loving, and kind-hearted girl, and she was always eager to help others. Sherita joined Pennsauken High School in the year 2001. She did well at her studies, and she was always a diligent student. As Sherita got closer to her graduation, she began making plans to attend a college, and she was looking forward to pursuing her dreams of becoming a social worker. On the 28th of November 2003, Sherita asked her mother for permission to go and hang out with her friends. Her mother gave her permission, and when she was about to leave, Wilma reminded her to be careful. Sherita told her mother that she was now 16 years old, and she will be fine because nobody will bother her. She first went to Hollywood Beauty Salon to have her nails and eyebrows done as she waited for her friend to come. Unfortunately, she didn't carry a mobile phone with her. When her friend was on her way to meet her at the salon, she got off at the wrong bus stop, so she never made it to meet Sherita at the salon, and they never communicated that day. After her friend had failed to show up, Sherita left the salon shortly before 6:30 p.m. after her nails and eyebrows were done. She decided to go visit her boyfriend, Kevin. Kevin lived together with his mother across 36th Street Bridge in the city of Camden, and he had recently graduated from high school. He was working, and he had 2 jobs that included working part-time as a security guard. When Sherita arrived at Kevin's place and knocked at the door, Kevin's mother opened the door, and Sherita asked her if she could see Kevin. When Kevin's mother saw Sherita, she didn't like her, and so she told her that Kevin was asleep. She didn't invite Sherita inside the house, and she sent her away, so Sherita immediately left Kevin's place. She was furious because Kevin's mother didn't let her inside the house to see Kevin. On her journey back home, she stopped by a payphone center on 32th Street and called Kevin 16 times using the payphone. She went ahead with her journey back home, and upon reaching 36th Street Bridge, Sherita met Warren Dixon, a 21-year-old young man who was coming from the mall, and it was already at night. Dixon had been convicted of a drug charge in Philadelphia, and he was already on probation. He lived with his father on 33th Street blocks away from Kevin's home. Dixon also attended Pennsauken High School, the same high school that Sherita was attending. While the two were in an English class, Dixon sat between Sherita and her best friend. The two found themselves all alone on 36th Street Bridge. Dixon tried to get Sherita to have sex with him, but she turned him down. That is when he used his force on her. He grabbed her by force. He staffed plastic bags she was carrying down her throat to prevent her from screaming. He then raped her. He then strangled Sherita to death. The 2 bags that Dixon had staffed down in her throat also suffocated her. Dixon then dumped Sherita's body under the 36th Street Bridge, and he fled away from the scene. Dixon dropped out of school and went to Philadelphia. Back at home, Sherita's parent waited for her to come back because she said that she would be back in a few hours. At 10 p.m. that night, she hadn't returned home. Sharita's mother assumed that she was at her best friend's house and she had slept there, so her mother wasn't worried. In the early morning hours of Saturday 29th of November 2003, the weekend after a Thanksgiving, Wilma Williams entered into her daughter's bedroom, expecting to find her asleep. She was shocked to find out that Sharita did not return home the previous night. Wilma called Sharita's friend and asked her about Sharita's whereabouts. She told Wilma that they didn't meet the previous day at the nail salon as they had planned, so she had no idea where Sharita was. Immediately, Wilma knew that something was wrong. Wilma and her husband immediately called the police, who later arrived at their home. They told the police that their daughter was missing. Therefore, they wanted to file a missing person report. The police told them to wait for 48 hours before they could file the report. The police told them that their daughter could have been a runaway teenager. Wilma and her husband, Harry, couldn't wait for 48 hours to file a missing person report, so they decided to look for their daughter on their own without the help of the police. They called Sharita's other friends to see if any of them had seen or spoken to her. Unfortunately, they had no idea where Sharita was. Wilma continued to call Sharita's other friends, and that is when one of Sharita's friends told her that Sharita was seen near 36th Street Bridge heading to her boyfriend's place. Sharita's friend told Wilma that Sharita's boyfriend was known as Kevin, and he lived near 36th Street Bridge. Wilma and husband decided to split up so that they can cover more grounds when looking for their daughter. Harry got Kevin's home address, and so he went there. Upon reaching there, he knocked at the door, and Kevin's mother answered. Harry asked her if his daughter was with them. Unfortunately, Kevin's mother told him that his daughter was not there at the moment. However, earlier on she came by, but she sent her away. Meanwhile, Wilma decided to retrace Sharita's steps from the night before she went missing. She started by going to the nail salon. Unfortunately, it was not opened at that time. She then went to 36th Street Bridge, since Sharita had passed that way. 36th Street Bridge was a place where homeless people and drug dealers would spend their time. It was a dark place, which was very unsafe for the residents of that area. By now, Wilma had started looking at all the possibilities that maybe her daughter may have been hit by a moving vehicle while passing at the bridge. She searched the area surrounding the bottom of the bridge. Suddenly, something very disturbing caught her attention. She saw a body of person which laid on its back. Wilma didn't get closer to have a look at the deceased. Instead, she immediately called 911. Shortly before 3 p.m., Pennsauken police arrived at 36th Street Bridge. They looked at the body and discovered that it was that of a young woman. She laid faced up. She had plastic bags in her mouth. She was on her back with a bandana around her neck. Her hands were tied behind her back, using a black cloth belt of her peacoat. Her jeans were unbuttoned, her panty was taken off and discarded near her body. She seemed sexually assaulted, her shirt was unbuttoned, her clothes were covered in dirt. They also found a model receipt. The receipt indicated that the model was in Cherry Hill Mall. The receipt was for a purchased black t-shirt, and it was dated 28th of November 2003 with a timestamp of 4:28 p.m. This suggested that she bought a t-shirt prior to her death. The police found a man's hair cap, and they also found a penny. The girl fitted in the description of Sharita, who was missing, and when her purse and an ID were found nearby, the police were able to confirm that the deceased was indeed Sherita Williams, and they notified her mother. Wilma called her husband, who arrived at the scene. The news was unimaginable, and he got devastated to witness the dead body of his daughter. Investigators took the body to the morgue, and as they prepared for an autopsy to be done, they then questioned Wilma. They asked her how she knew that their daughter's body was under the 36th Street Bridge where she had checked. Wilma told the investigators that one of Sharita's friends told her that Sharita was seen crossing over the 36th Street Bridge on her way to her boyfriend's place. The autopsy report were out, and the investigators discovered that Sharita was indeed sexually assaulted before being murdered. 2 plastic bags were stacked down in her throat. This made her to suffocate to death. There were bruising on her body. She had deep red marks and bracing on her hips. Also, there were no fingerprints found on the receipt, which was collected at the crime scene. Unfortunately, there were no biological evidence that were uncovered during the autopsy, so the investigators sent her jeans and shirt to the lab for processing, hoping to find some biological evidence. The investigators looked at the receipt that they had found at the crime scene. The receipt indicated that she purchased a T-shirt at a model sporting goods store at 4:28 p.m. prior to her death. The receipt also gave information about the location of the sporting goods store, so the investigators went to that store to continue with their investigations. Upon arriving there, they requested for surveillance footage showing the day Sharita went shopping there. Unfortunately, CCTV cameras were not working that day, so they couldn't find further leads to the case. Furthermore, Sharita had bought the T-shirt in cash on that Black Friday. To top it all, the place was so crowded with shoppers on that day, so the cashiers at the store could not help them with any information concerning Sharita. The investigators began tracing Sharita's last known movements, so they went to Hollywood Beauty Nail Salon, where Sharita had earlier on went to get her nails and eyebrows done. They interviewed the management, but they found no information that could help them catch Sharita's killer. The investigators also had access to the surveillance footage of the salon. Surveillance footage only showed her movements as she walked in and out of the premise, and she headed to the direction of the 36th Street Bridge. After learning about Kevin and Sharita's relationship, the investigators went to Kevin's place. They first met his mother, whom they interviewed. Kevin's mother told the investigators that Sharita came by at 6:30 p.m. as night was approaching to see Kevin, but she never let her inside the house. She sent her away because she didn't want her to disturb her son, who was sleeping after working all day with his father. Kevin needed to sleep because he had to go and work as security guard at night. His shift was to start at 11 p.m., and he already doing 2 jobs. The investigators also interviewed Kevin. Kevin said that he never saw Sharita that evening. However, she called him 16 times while on 32nd Street using a payphone, and during one of those calls, he turned off his phone. The investigators went and retrieved the phone records from the payphone to verify if Kevin was telling the truth. They found out that it was true that Sharita had called him 16 times. The investigators also looked at Kevin's phone records, but it turned out that Kevin answered a call from another girl, an 18-year-old lady by the name of Stephanie. It was discovered that this lady was also Kevin's girlfriend, and this gave the investigators a red flag. They suspected a love triangle in Sharita's death. Stephanie was brought to the police station for questioning. When asked about Sharita, she claimed she didn't know her. The investigators gave her a voice stretch test, and they found out that she was lying. However, after a thorough investigation, the investigators didn't find any physical evidence linking Stephanie to Sharita's death, so she was cleared of any involvement in Sharita's death. Investigators collected a swab of Kevin's DNA for comparison. They placed the DNA into the CODIS, but it turned out negative, indicating that Kevin was not involved in Sharita's murder. He was also given a lie detector, and he was able to pass the test. So Kevin was also cleared of any involvement in Sharita's death. There were no new leads in the following months, and the case began to turn cold. Sharita's father constantly kept the investigators on their toes and asking for updates. He didn't want them to abandon the case. Every year, the Williams family marched across the 36th Street Bridge demanding justice for Sharita's murder. They held community gatherings and vigils to keep the case alive. They also posted thousands of flyers around the city, hoping for any leads that could help solve Sharita's murder case. 4 years later, there was still no lead in Sharita's death. Later, the lab results were out, and they found semen on Sharita's clothes. They placed the semen on a database, but could match with none of the sex offenders or any of Sharita's acquaintances who were registered on the database in connection to her murder. On the 1st of February 2007, the CODIS found a march. The DNA in Sharita's jeans matched the DNA of a man named Warren Dixon. The investigators brought him to the station for questioning. During the interrogation, Dixon admitted that he knew Sharita and they were classmates at Pennsauken High School. They told him that they found his DNA in Sharita, and he was asked to explain. He defended himself by saying that they had sex and it was consensual. The police waited for a month in 2008 before getting a court order to collect Dixon's hair sample and run a test at a private testing lab in Virginia to see if it matched the cap retrieved at the crime scene. However, the lab report came back negative, stating the cap did not belong to him. As the interrogation continued, Dixon asked the investigators that if he was responsible for Sharita's death, but it was accidental, will he still have to go to jail? The investigators had enough evidence to charge Warren Dixon with sexual assault and murder, and so they arrested him on January 2009. Investigators informed the Williams family of the arrest, and tears of jubilation overcame Harry. Warren Dixon was defiant throughout his trial at the court. He wouldn't stand up, and court officers had to lift him out of his chair onto his feet. He also refused to acknowledge the judges, and he never answered any questions except when he was asked whether he has an attorney. In March 2011, Warren Dixon pledged guilty to sexually assaulting Sharita and murdering her. In June 2011, he was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment. Warren Dixon was dragged out of the courtroom after he refused to move. His behavior was so bad that his own attorney had to apologize. He is set to serve at least 17 years at the East Jersey State Prison before parole eligibility. He will up on parole on the 30th of January, 2026. Sharita's parents sworn to be there and make sure that Dixon serves his full sentence. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe, turn on the notifications bell, like and share so that you can get more stories like your support keeps the channel growing.